Threat Response is Cisco's security integration platform for incident investigation and response that brings together threat intelligence, local visibility, and response functions from multiple Cisco security products into one easy-to-use unified workbench. I'm Ben Greenbaum from Cisco Advanced Threat Solutions, and this is the Configuring Threat Response series. One of the cornerstones of this integrated architecture is Advanced Malware Protection, or AMP. AMP for Endpoints provides powerful endpoint protection, detection, and response capabilities, and in Threat Response it provides unparalleled visibility not just into your endpoints, but via the AMP Unity feature into other AMP-enabled points in your defenses, such as firewalls and email and web security gateways. In this video, we're going to walk through how to configure an AMP for Endpoints module in Cisco Threat Response. This story starts not in Threat Response, but in the AMP for Endpoints console. You can see clearly we're having some kind of problem on our network, so let's scroll down and we're going to find a malicious file hash, click on it, and we get a drop-down menu of options that includes the ability to copy that hash to the clipboard. Let's do that, and we're going to take that hash over to Threat Response, drop it into the Investigate window, and hit Investigate. Now Threat Response is doing the lookups of that hash against all of the modules that we currently have configured. Now in this example, it's just the default modules that come with the system. We haven't configured any additional modules yet, but we see that we do get that the AMP file reputation module has come back and said this is a malicious file, which we already knew. But we have the ability to search all 4 of these modules at once, which is still fairly powerful, but let's add to our capabilities here. Let's add a module for AMP for Endpoints. AMP for Endpoints is the default selection for module type, so we don't need to do anything there. We get some instructions on the right over here that tell us how to go through and get this done. We can give it a name, pick a URL based on where you're located. Don't pick other. There's not yet any good reason to do that, so just don't. And then it's asking for a third-party API client ID and an API key, neither of which are things that we have. So we're going to go back to the AMP for Endpoints console and get those. Under Accounts, go to API Credentials, hit New API Credential, give it a name that's meaningful to you again, and it's asking us for a scope. It can be read-only, or it can be read and write. Now these are credentials that API clients are going to use to authenticate to AMP for Endpoints. You can authorize those credentials to get information, or to, via the read and write option, modify your policies. So you get a warning about how you can modify your policies with read and write. So we accept that and continue to move on. And it comes back with your API key details. These are going to disappear as soon as we move away from the page. So be ready to copy them directly into what you need them for, or, like the warning up top says, keep them in a password manager or an encrypted file somewhere. We go back to Threat Response, paste in our client ID and our API key, and hit Create Module, and you see the module is now created at the bottom of the list. How painless was that? Let's go back to the investigation. That hash is saved for us in the Investigation tab, and we're just going to refresh and see what happens. Look at all of that. This is the difference that adding the AMP for Endpoints module made to our investigation. We have the file that we were investigating. We see immediately the endpoint that saw the file that AMP had told us about initially. We see the relationships between that file and all the other artifacts. Here's a URL that it reached out to that we know is malicious. Here's the IP address that that URL was hosted at. Here's some other IP addresses that were involved in this incident. Here are all the file paths and file names that the file has been seen at by AMP for Endpoints. Here's some additional IP addresses that the file connected to. Here's the parent file, a clean file that dropped this malicious file in this incident, and all this information that we didn't have 5 minutes ago. Top right, we see the histogram of when this file was seen in our environment, and furthermore, if we click on this file here or anywhere else in the interface or any other file in the interface from now on, we get some additional response actions tied to the AMP for Endpoints module that we just configured. We have the ability to go to the file trajectory in AMP for Endpoints. We can search AMP for Endpoints for this hash. We can add it to simple custom detection lists that we have configured in AMP for Endpoints. We're going to go back to AMP for Endpoints for just one more minute to show you one last thing. At the very beginning of this thing, we found a malicious file, clicked on it, and got this menu where we copied it to the clipboard. However, there's also this Casebook over here, this little blue notepad icon. Casebooks are a Cisco threat response feature that I go into much more detail about in a video that you're going to see in a minute. But in short, it's another integration point with which the integrated products can in turn communicate back to threat response and allow you to do some investigation actions without actually leaving the site you're already on. So let's open this, let's hit Get Casebook and get those capabilities in AMP for Endpoints. So here's the video that I mentioned. So let's authorize Cisco Threat Response to AMP for Endpoints, and that's done. So back to the dashboard to see what has changed. And here is, next to that file hash and every other file hash and every observable, including the IP address above it, we have this drop-down icon, and if you mouse over it, you get a couple additional controls. If you click on that, you get a pivot menu that allows you to do a couple new things, including add it to a new casebook, add it to the current casebook, or pivot directly into threat response and do an investigation of that observable. So it's been about 6 minutes, and in that time, we've configured our AMP module for threat response and showed the investigation difference before and after as a result. We've configured casebooks in AMP while we were in there and showed the differences that that makes to the AMP interface. We didn't even touch on the actual casebooks functionality itself. And we didn't show all of the differences that these two actions can make, but this video is mostly about how to get it up and running, which we have now covered. Hopefully you watch this video and configure the AMP for Endpoints module and Casebooks for yourself and are able to explore and discover all of the rich functionality and visibility that these two things can bring to each other. Thank you very much for your interest, and we'll see you again in future Configuring Cisco Threat Response videos.